after those two enthralling panels in the morning. I'm hoping that during this panel, as we continue to explore the intersection of science and technology and society, we will be grounding it in the context of the wonderful exhibition outside. I'm Satchit Balsari. I'm faculty at the Harvard Medical School and at the Public Health School. I'm a practicing emergency medicine doctor. But over the last year and a half, I've had this incredible opportunity to work with several graduate students across campus on the SAB EK exhibition that you walked through as you came in. In this panel, we have assembled a very interesting cast of characters. We have Jyoti and Macwan, the General Secretary of the Self-Employed Women's Association herself, but then also students from across campus. Deepak Ramola graduated from our ed school last year. Bobby from Harvard College the year before. Kartikeya is about to, if we have commencement, graduate from the Kennedy School, and Hiteshree, who I'll introduce in a bit, is at the Graduate School of Design. Over the first 15 or 20 minutes, Jyoti and I will chat about the Self-Employed Women's Association to provide you a little context. This is one of the largest unions of women in the informal sector, right? So these are working women in the informal sector in India, which is about 93% of India's labor force. And the mandate for my team was to study the impact of the pandemic on the membership of the Self-Employed Women's Association, and then what SEWA did in response to it. We will not talk about the exhibition right now. It speaks for itself, and I'm hoping you have some time to study and listen to the voices of the women themselves that we have tried to center in the exhibit. What I would like to do instead is hear from Jyoti herself. Jyoti, welcome to Harvard. You have been here for a couple of days. You were just at the Center for International Development the last 2 days, where you were a speaker in their Global Empowerment meeting. And the topic this year was on gender empowerment and gender equality. Very curious to hear what you thought of the meeting, what SEWA shared with members there, and what you learned from other movements that were present at the meeting.
Thank you so much. Namaste to all of you. And I'm very glad to have this opportunity to be here. And when I speak of SEWA, I speak of myself, because I come from an agriculture worker family. And being at SEWA for almost 38 years now, I do say, whenever anyone asks me what is SEWA, I would always say I am SEWA. So we all members at SEWA are SEWA. So I'm witness to the journey of my own life at SEWA and the journey of 52 years of SEWA. So I'm very happy to be here, and it's a great opportunity, honor for me to be here and speak on my own experience. Yes, yesterday I was invited to speak at GEM, which is a global empowerment meeting. And specifically, they were talking on gender equality. And also, while it comes to gender equality, it's more on talking about women and girls, discrimination, exploitation. Where are women in politics, to find out what is man's roles towards them. How do we invest more in women, that they have their negotiation skill increases, train them to do that so that they are at their own, and that fill up the gaps when it comes to the gender equality. So I think those were the highlights of the meeting yesterday. It was very well organized, and I really learned a lot in terms of getting more educative and learning from the other global parts on what does they mean by gender equality. And I specifically was invited here to speak on more on the informal sector workers, the women in the informal sector workers. And for us, when it comes to women, we don't see ourselves as just women. We are worker. We women are worker, contributing to our family, contributing to the society, and also contributing to the economy of our own country. So we are an important contributor to the economy everywhere. So just talking on women was something different to me hearing that, but I focused more on that we all are worker. And work in our hand means a lot. That gives meaningful life to us, that gives livelihood, and also that gives dignity for ourselves to stay in our houses and in our society. So I think work is very important. And every woman, I talk of the informal sector of our country, where we speak of the agriculture workers, small and marginal farmers, street vendors, waste recyclers, construction workers, hand cart pullers, salt farmers, hand loaders, artisans. So many trade in the informal economy. So I think if I say, if we count the subcategories of all the categories where we are organizing, we really have the data on organizing in 122 trades in the informal economy of our country. And that is so big. So we have seen that all women with these two hands, they have skills. They have skills which could make them to work and earn livelihood from them. But our own concern is that these women workers' skill in the informal economy is not very much visible and also not valuable. We understood only professional skills are valuable. So what about our skills? We work 8 to 10 hours a day. We earn money from that. And we try to sustain our livelihoods in the family. So that is very important. The skill part is very important, what every woman has. And that has to be valued. So I think I spoke more on the women work and their skill. And also because we women workers are working so much for less income, more hours, less control over our income. And what we need is, especially in the initial stage, in the initial years while we got registered, we wanted 3 V's for us. That's visibility, voice, and validity of our own work, what we are doing. Because this 93% had carried no policies for them. They were not identified to be the workers. And I know in my initial training, while I joined as a member of SEWA, I was trained to introduce so that I have importance of myself, that I am Jyoti Macwan, and I contribute with my work to my family, to the society, and to the economy of our country. So I am a huge contributor to the economy, and I work. I am a contributor. That's how we were introducing ourselves, to sensitize our own contribution and also to sensitize the government that we are the workers. And I think that was my highlight yesterday at the GEM meeting. And more of then we had talked about, because I was highlighting on now, if you see in the SEWA's profile after 52 years, our profile has changed. We have 4th generation of our members who are the daughters and daughter-in-law who are the members of SEWA now. They are educated comparatively to their mothers and grandmothers, and their needs and aspirations are very different now. So how do now our own organization plan on what they wanted to learn? They are educated, they wanted to learn. They wanted to have new skills in them, upgrade their skills. But one very good thing came out from our members, that they also wanted to learn the technology, the new skills, everything in their hand, but they wanted to retain their old traditional trades. So how does the technology comes in between to retain and increase more productivity and increase income in their own traditional scale? So I think that is what I talked about in the yesterday's meeting. And lastly, I had focused on more the data, because as SEWA started working in India, we work in 18 states with the 3 million of membership. But also we had gone to Afghanistan, we went to Sri Lanka, we are now in South Africa. So supporting other sisters who are in the informal economy like us. So how do we increase ourselves in terms of bringing this solidarity among all the informal economy workers across the globe? And I think that data for us to collect and to create a platform globally is very important. So I had highlighted on the data part. And lastly, I had more talked on the, because see, after 52 years, I mean, we started from the beginning of how do we bring work security, bring in income security, food security, at least 2 times enough meal to eat with our families, and access to social security. But now the climate crisis or climate change, whatever we say, now is affecting a lot to the trades in the informal sectors. Everything is now going down. So you have to start from zero to bring them up. So how do you focus the whole issue of the climate change now? We look forward for the 50 years to come, because while we were planning, we celebrated 50 years with our founder, Ila Bhatt. And then we had this whole, she was asking us, how do we celebrate? And we were telling, we had so many activities in mind, but then she said to us, would you like to look back for the 50 years which has gone, or would you like to look forward for the 50 years to come, where SEWA could celebrate 100 years with the generations to come? That was important. And that gives an answer to climate, the effect of climate change, the pandemics, the COVID, all what we suffered, because we were the highest sufferers of the pandemic. Many of our members' family died. They were in the hospitals, they were in the home, asking to quarantine, keep a distance in a small room with 8 people to stay in a house. And then while I was exercising on what we dream for the other 50 years to come, with all the leaders, members, and all in all the states, and everyone said that for that generation, they don't want any more pandemic, no COVID, no impact of the climate change. Now they wanted their generations to live a happy life. So that's what it made when I was talking to Ilaben, that this is what our members dream for their generations to come. And that made us to see a plan, a campaign towards cleaning our sky. And that's the campaign for the 50 years to come. So I highlighted also that, because when it comes to women, it's not only the discrimination, it's not only about the politics, but it is also beyond that. And lastly, they had highlighted more on sexual harassment and violence at the workplace, domestic violence and all. And I remember very well, from the very beginning, Ilaban said that poverty is also a kind of violence with the consent of the society. So how do we play a role there? So I think those were my highlights yesterday at the Gem.
Thank you, Jyoti Ben. And as with any question to any SEWA member, and some of us have witnessed this a few times, that's what one question gets you. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I invite you to listen to more testimonies. outside. Jyotiban, you alluded to the aspirations of the new generation and science and technology, and we're here today on this conference on science and technology. May I ask you how SEWA negotiates its relationship with science and technology? You know, the organization is built on Gandhian ideals, and Mahatma Gandhi himself had a contentious relationship with technology, and he had cautioned that he felt that some technology may replace skill. In his book Khadi, he makes this very poignant observation. He says, I dread the day which he saw coming, 120 years ago, where there will be so much leisure that you will go somewhere and engage in physical activity for the sake of it without producing anything from the fruits of your work. And I think of it every morning when I go for a run. We just had a session on AI. The world is celebrating the production and the mechanization and automation of so many jobs. How has SEWA dealt with science and technology?
Very important, Satchit bhai, because of course, the science and technology both are very, very important, which can play a huge role in bringing more productivity in all the trades where informal economy workers are working. They can increase the income and increase the productivity and decrease the drudgery what they are facing. And our members wanted to use technology. They always said, we have not gone to school, but why not we have access to technology, access to awareness, access to training on this. We would like to use that. But the only question is, they know how to use it because they know that this is how they are going to reduce the drudgery and increase their income. But technology cannot come from top to bottom. So how does you have a technology in the hands of poor, which really reduces their drudgery down, increase their productivity, and increase their income? So it has not to be from top to down. How does it come? What technology the poor needs? In what trade they are working? What is their need of the technology on the ground? And how can the technology come in a way which helps them to increase their productivity and increase their income? So I think that is important.
Certainly a crisis here that you and I have talked about. Dr. Sheikh and I were in the salt pans in January, and you'll see this film of Jamna Ben raking the salt in the last installation. And there was a team of several of us from Harvard, and we asked Jamna Ben, what can we do for you? And with every SEWA member, when you ask a question, you have to be prepared for the answer. So she looks at us quite incredulously, and then looks at her rake, and she says, it's 2024, why am I doing this? She says, can't you automate this? And then she reminds us that every season they have to go into the salt pans and then bore these wells, right? But it's blind digging, and it costs a few thousand rupees for every foot. And they dig 4, 5, 6 times until they hit water. And so she looked and said, can you not figure out a way to make this better? Isn't there an equipment which will tell me where the water is? And then finally, she looked at her shelter, and it's 122 degrees Fahrenheit, and she says this shelter is insufficient, and so I don't drink water. And Dr. Swaminathan and I were talking this morning, and she refers to a report from 10 years ago where the salt pan workers will not drink water because they're exposed all throughout the day, and then they'll end up with UTIs and pelvic infections. So how should we think about bridging this gap where our IITs and IIMs are not solving the problems of the West? How would SEWA bring our engineers to the villages?
Then I have a question in a way that can the science and technology bring agri-clinics in the villages? Can they bring the energy clinics or the renewable energy clinics in the villages or in the community? Can they bring the electric or automobile centers in the villages? Communication centers in the villages? Can science and technology do that if you talk of the poor informal sector workers? And we do need a lot of research and development centers in the community, in the villages, which continuously takes place on innovating how does the drudgery get reduces and then their productivity get increases. So if this is not happening this way, then I don't think that the technology or science could help the poor women on the ground.
And I think this is a crisis in academia, even in the West, including in our schools of public health, where increasingly we are finding that we are teaching students to begin with data sets. So you start with a data set and see what question is convenient to ask, as opposed to go to the field and see what problems are worth solving. And I think there's growing recognition that we have to change this model. There are some lovely examples, however, where I have seen, for example, at Hansiba and SEWA Bazaar, where, through the interviews, my notions of what the working poor mean, look like, can do, cannot do, have changed, where they have leveraged advances in technologies. We saw this in the pandemic as well. That lovely multimedia display that you walk across, that Bobby built, tells the stories of women who had never used smartphones, who learned to open online bank accounts on phones. And like you said, the poor are willing to use technology. Other examples at SEWA that strike you as effective use?
I mean, so many examples. I would say these poor women workers, not only the youth, even the mothers and the grandmothers are using now the mobile phone, which are trained, because we are a membership-based organization and we have to renew members every year. We have 3 million members, so all our leaders have to be trained in terms of going into their trades, their village, their community to renew them. And how does we do that? Years before, we were just moving house to house, filling the receipt book, giving one receipt to the members and one with us to collect the data. But now then, we did try to find out an app which we could train our women themselves to learn that app on renewing the membership. So, and also train the women in the villages that they on the mobile can transfer that membership fees through mobile. And that's how they get renewed. So now it's a complete membership management system held at SEWA, which is fully run by our leaders who might have not gone to school, but now they know how to renew the members. And so every year, even during the COVID, we were not able to meet anyone during the lockdown and anything. I mean, we were not able to come out of the houses. We were not able to see the faces of our members, which was so painful to us, because that's not who we are. We always go and meet our members and be with them and discuss and talk about the issues and find solutions. So this pandemic really made us to, and then we knew at the end of pandemic, but our membership was renewed at the home using the technology. Similarly, we have small and marginal farmers who grows their agri-produces or the spices in their own field, and they go and sell it to the middleman and they get very less price. But now the small and marginal farmers have formed their own company, which is now branded to be Rudy. And now we have an app because we collect the produces. They have registered their own company. They collect all the produces from small and marginal farmers at one center. We have a team of workers who clean it, process it, pack it, And then we have trained our workers themselves to become a Rudy marketing. We call them Rudy sisters, that they go and sell it in the market. But now going to sell in each market and then getting the demand, and then again going, it was taking so much of time and money both. So we had developed our own app sitting with our members, that if I go in the villages, and she wants 10 kg of rice, so why not I have an app on my mobile, which is known to be Rudy Sandesa Vyavhar, that I book that order on the mobile, and the next day that rice reaches to the family. So our Rudy women are using that app, and that business has grown with less cost, more income in the hands of, and the whole supply chain is in the hands of women. From collecting the produce, growing, collecting, processing, cleaning, packaging, and marketing.
As Professor Khanna, who just saw in the audience a minute ago, might remember, when we sent our undergrads to study Rudy, they had discovered this app long before Amazon Prime was delivering overnight orders. So your app may have preceded chefs. I would like to very much invite a wonderful team here that has helped capture the story and the struggles of the pandemic. But as we transition to the exhibition story about SAB EK, I think we're all curious to learn from this rallying cry of SEWA. What are the lessons of SAB EK as we grapple through talking about gender inequality, just in growing inequality in India, despite the advances in our economy, in our science, and our technology. What lessons do we learn from SAB EK?
Before going to SAB EK, I just wanted to quote two things of Ilaben, which is very close to our heart, all workers' heart, members' heart. And that is, she says that science and technology should nurture workers as well as nature, not cause any vulnerability or inequality. So when it comes to science and technology. And secondly, she very much said that we are very happy to have this technology for scavengers. Our members will use it. Can you bring that? So I think these are the two, when we talk of the technology, it is the two aspects is who is using it and who is owning it, who is the owner of that technology. That is very important. So just two things to add on the technology and science part. But Satchit, the SAB EK has a lot of meaning to SEWA. Because in the 50 years of our journey, we have two assets in our hand. Of course, we would not look back because we have to look forward as per Ilaben's vision. But two things which made our journey of 50 years to cross, and now we are in the 53 years. And that was the asset which we have, we all workers have. We may be poor, but we have asset. And that is our collective organized strength and our values. So when we talk of our values, that has a lot of link with SAB EK. Because up till now in the journey of SEWA, we have nothing achieved without any struggle. And this was only possible because we all members, with our collective organized strength, value-based collective organized strength, have fight together. Irrespective of what caste we are, what religion we are, we don't know about that. We only know what trade we are working. So even at SEWA, up till now in this 52 years, we have no data on what religion we follow. We only have data on how many agriculture workers we have organized, how many street vendors we have organized, how many construction workers we have organized, how many salt farmers we have organized. That data is fully with us. And I think that is what to me it means Hum Sab Ek. And that has a very deepen meaning of it. It's very, we all are sisters, and the process, the organizing process has really helped us to understood that it is not someone giving and we are taking. It's not give or take a relationship. We are sisters, we are family. And with our collective organized strength, we overcome the issues what we face in our own trade and in our own society. So I think that is what Hum Sab Ek is a value to us. We all are one. And we never ask anyone never anyone to me at SEWA has asked in this 38 years of journey, what religion I follow. And I think that's the base of SEWA. And I think these two things, our collective organized strength and the values which says Hum Sab Ek, which also will cross the journey of the 50 years to celebrate 100 years. And we are so excited and happy with that. Including when the disasters, we have faced so many disasters, so many natural calamities, the earthquake, the man-made disasters, the nature-made disasters. And we never think of our own selves. Then we all together, all 3 million members together, think of how do we help others? How do we help this area which is affected? How do we help this trade which is affected? So I think that is the values to us, and that I see to be the meaning of Hum Sab Ek, which is very, very important of SEWA. Including I am witness to the COVID, the pandemic. We would never have fought out and bring to this level of story which you brought, the voice, visibility, and validity of our work with showing our trades, which was so important. That was only because we followed the value of Hum Sab Ek. And I think that will be there together with us, our collective strength and our values. For looking forward the other 50 years. So I thank you so much, Satchit Bhai. I have to really thank for bringing these stories here, because that has taken every of our members had some losses in their family, including myself. But while we saw that we were so many with this pain, and I think the process of Hum Sab Ek, what is demonstrated, which is the journey which is brought here in this building, has taken away our pains. Because it was not only me who has suffered, it is so many of members, they have suffered. And their voices of suffering, their visibility, and their validity of the work in which they had suffered, because they had also lost their livelihood during that pandemic, which has been brought in this exhibition. And so on behalf of SEWA, I know you don't like if I say thank you, but, and I also see the biggest role of Mihir Bhai, son of Ilaban, because in all disaster, he was with SEWA members. And I really would like to thank him, the family, and you. And if you don't like thank you, then I would just say pranam to
we will use
all of you.
This wonderful note to transition from this very generous note from you to the folks we must thank and invite you all to come up. These 4 of a team of a much larger team of graduate students who've helped tell the story of SEWA. So thank you so much.
Pranam,
thank you, pranam. Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'm going to invite Hiteshree to lead this conversation. The genesis story of the exhibition itself is, as some of you have heard, I was stuck with 30 hours of oral histories because every interview ends up like this one. And it's overwhelming, and I recognize that there were stories here that needed to be shared with a lot of policymakers and researchers and scientists and artists around the world. And I think the exhibition you see outside is honestly the vision of what makes working at Harvard so deeply satisfying. And it's just the brilliance of our students.
Thank you. I think it's audible. Yeah. I think we'll start by introducing the three team members who represent all of the different schools that we've been able to collaborate with. We have Bobby, who's just graduated from Howard College and is working at the science lab, helping students work on similar projects. As the one that you see outside, we have Deepak, who's again a recent graduate from the School of Education, and also a filmmaker and an artist himself, and Kartikeya, who is now going to graduate from the Kennedy School. So I'd like to start with asking the three of you, what prompted you to contribute to this project, given that, Bobby, you didn't have a connection to India before this, you hadn't worked on a project related to India. Deepak, Kartikeya, why did you choose to contribute to an art project like this?
I can start. Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I think for me, there were three things. The first was the pandemic is an experience, a global experience that I think everyone relates to. But the lens that we have come to know of it or understand of it is a very external lens, very urban, very news, journalistic lens. But hearing from the grassroots, getting to learn from the women, the detailed account of not just a phase in their life, but every hour of their life, I think is a kind of citizen ethnography that you don't get to see. So that was very important. The second was the through line of hope. It is a story of suffering. It is a story of pain, as Jyoti Ben was saying. But there is this commonality of resilience and hope that I think is so infectious that even if you're having a bad day, when you watch that 30 hours of oral history, you can feel a sense of optimism. And the third thing is that SEWA is so driven by values, you cannot do this exhibition by having contrasting values. You have to start mirroring the same. We have to show solidarity in our ideas. We have to show some sort of resilience in making this happen. We have to work under time and budget constraints like SEWA members on most days and still be creative. And I thought, isn't that fascinating that there are these women in the heartlands of India almost epitomizing these values. And we here in Cambridge who get to live those values through them and collaborate. So that's why I jumped in. What about you, Bobby?
Yeah, I can go next. So I was the last member to come on, and it was originally because they had this idea for the You're on Mute exhibit, organizing all of these phones together, and they had originally emailed my professor asking if he wanted to join the exhibit, and he was like, no, I do not. Like, I do not have the time to organize all these phones together, but he's like, I have a teaching assistant who has much more time than I do. And so he asked me, I remember he sent me an email and he said, hey, would you be interested, working on this exhibit, you'll be organizing a video across all of these phones. And just from the idea of the project alone, just like the engineering problem of having to organize all of these phones, I was already like, yes, please, like anything I need to do to get on this exhibit. But then I got on a call with Satchit and he tells me this whole story. And I think a lot of times with engineers, most engineers are surrounded by engineers and they're solving engineering problems. Like, how can we make our lives as engineers easier? But very rarely do you see them, trying to work to help problems of those around you. And so after he told me, the story of SEWA and how they were able to adapt over COVID, not to, just uplift themselves, but uplift, the surrounding communities and, being able to do stuff that even like governments couldn't organize to get together, I thought there was just no way I wasn't gonna be a part of this exhibit. It's just very rarely do you get to use your engineering skills to, for anything but, like the needs of your immediate circle. So it was just a great opportunity and just such an amazing story to help platform.
Thank you. Kartikeya, would you like to go next?
So as you said, Hiteshree, I am a public policy student and I've been a public policy researcher for a while. So a typical RA job is not this exhibition. But it's interesting that you use the word art project. I don't necessarily see it as one or another. I think art involves research and research involves artistic decisions. In fact, I was Satchit and Professor Khanna's teaching fellow last semester for their course on entrepreneurship in developing countries. And the module is divided in 3 parts: thinking like a scientist, thinking like an artist, and thinking like a planner. And I think, and of course they focus SEWA's work in it as well, because SEWA does it so beautifully in an informal economy. So yeah, I think that's what I think drove me. I think as a policy researcher, I've always worked in action-oriented research anyway. I always love to see what the end goal is of whatever I do. So, and in that you have to sort of inform and build a critical mass, which, you know, usually papers do not do that quite effectively. So for example, I think about you know, health expenditure in India being one of the lowest in the world, but it doesn't really, well, you say it to a common person in India, it wouldn't move them at all. You have to talk about like real terms, like real results and consequences of that having happened. So for example, you know, why were there no beds available in the Delta wave? I personally lost my father because of this unavailability of beds. So I really relate with, you know, how people sort of view the state, view policy. And I think this project really brings together voices from across the board and communicates it in a way that is understandable and also speaks to people's pain. And I guess we have to do it in a compelling way. People are saturated, audience is limited. I think in a typical, if we had to do this survey that we did, I would have probably been involved with Satchit and a couple of other RAs. We would have, you know, done a paper. But I think this is something that reaches a wider audience. It involves a wider audience as well. So I would have not imagined working with Deepak and Bobby and you. So that was one. I think another thing that I want to talk about is the oral history aspect of it. And one of my favorite writers is this Belarusian journalist and the 2015 Nobel laureate Svetlana Alexievich. And her work is on, her work primarily centers women and their views as they go through, you know, wars and political upheavals. And she was asked, you know, why don't you find your own voice? And she had said that, you know, oral histories and telling oral histories, compiling oral histories is the most equal way of engaging with the audience. You're treating your research subjects as an equal, and you're an equal. And I think that really attracted me to this opportunity.
Thank you. And that was the same reason I think I joined the project, to be able to, it was very interesting and both empowering to be able to work with SEWA members as co-authors. I think I'll jump to Bobby first to ask a little bit more about the background. Could you share more about the process and how did you tackle the layers of complexity we kept throwing at you? We started by asking Bobby to split a video across 2 phones, and then the request escalated to 70 phones. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think to share about that, I think you have to just like talk about the engineering process in general. I think most people, when they talk to me, they say, they think that I just plan something and then I have a whole plan, like a Lego set basically, and then I just put it together and then we have a final product. But the building is actually like a major part of the planning process. You need to build rapid prototypes to understand, you know, how things work, how things play together. I think, for example, we knew that text was going to be a big part of the You Are on Mute exhibit, and the original plan was just have 70 phones. We'll split up text across, maybe have like some captioning, but then we have a prototype of 6 phones working together with some subtitles on them, and we immediately realize they're intelligible. So it's like, okay, well, subtitles aren't going to be an option then. What can we do? And then we had the idea, I think it was Satchit's idea, to incorporate tablets into the actual display. And since we'd been making these intermediate prototypes, we didn't have, a complete prototype made and then realize that it's not working and then not have enough time. So really the engineering process was about making those iterative steps and immediately trying to get feedback, see what the team thinks, and then, work your way one by one until you have an entire exhibit assembled.
Thank you, Bobby. Deepak, you worked very closely with Bobby in framing the content that goes on the 70 phones. And given that you've spent over a decade collecting wisdom from communities across the world, what was different about what you heard from SEWA members? And could you share a few examples of what quotes, anecdotes stood out to you and have stayed with you?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for the last 15 years, just collecting wisdom from common corridors, if there's one insight that has sort of sprung up, it is that wisdom is not in the admiration of knowledge, it's in the use of it. And when you see the story of SEWA, you see the use of that wisdom in such a relatable, accessible, and time-sensitive way that it makes you almost want to say, when I was watching the 30 hours of these oral histories, I was not thinking about the words of poor women, entrepreneur. I was thinking of words innovative and path-breaking and revolutionary, because those were the ideas and strategies these women were using. An example I'll tell you, I was speaking to Prutha-ben, who spearheaded the education movement and the initiative part during pandemic. Now, here's a woman who just wants to engage the children of these women who are working. And all she has is the tool of the phone. So she sends these WhatsApp messages to the families or to the kids in forms of little assignments. And even after listening to almost 2 hours of her interview, when I got on the phone with her, I said, were they reading all the messages you were sending to them? And she said, oh, I actually turned into a radio jockey. I realized that written text would not be so much fun after 3 weeks. So I started modulating my voice, and I would send voice notes of saying, good morning from Ahmedabad, and how are you today? And this is the weather outside. And I literally had a moment where I thought, we spend thousands of dollars studying mass media courses on how to be, a radio jockey and production. And here is somebody who's actually having such great impact, such deep influence in real time on the lives of these children by trying to be innovative and open-minded in making them participate to her initiative and her way of getting them to learn despite the barriers of pandemic and the opportunities. So I think it's in these very nuanced sections of engagement that the beauty and the intelligence and the wisdom of SEWA members shines. You can see it as a large outfit of 3 million people, but when you zoom in, you can actually zoom into the pixel of that one woman, Prutha-ben, or a one Jyoti-ben, or a one Kapila-ben, and you will still find that tender heroism, shining through and through. That has been just phenomenal.
Thank you, Deepak. For those of you who haven't had the chance, we have a tablet dedicated to Prutha-ben's experience of how she conducted the education program, and that's right next to the You're on Mute installation. Where you can use the headset to learn more about the process. The last question is for Kartikeya, which is that I view this exhibition not just as a record and representation of SEWA's response strategies to a crisis like the pandemic, but also an attempt to utilize the design concept of foresight. Foresight involves recognizing a gap in the current situation, examining its historical origins, and then devising alternative solutions to course correct innovatively and vision alternative futures. So I think your research allowed us to link SEWA's narrative with the larger arc of feminist labor history. Could you highlight some of the key labor struggles that you connected SEWA's story to, and how do you think this work contributes to imagining a new model for collective organization?
So I'll talk about a few things, and you can see them across the exhibits as well, but I'll talk about a few key things about the Indian economy and what constraints SEWA faces, and I might go beyond 1 minute for that. So first, I think the first and foremost characteristic of the Indian economy is still largely agricultural. And what has happened in the recent decades as mainly male migration towards the urban centers of India has left agriculture in what they say as more feminized. 3 out of 4 agriculture workers in India are women. And the key thing to know here is that only under 1 in 5 women in India get compensated for their work outside their household. And this is one of the largest female labor force drops that we've seen in the last decade, from 2005 to 2015. And within this backdrop, we also have the overwhelmingly large informal economy. So more than 90% of the economy of India is informal. So how can poor people be resilient in this case, and how can women be resilient if they're facing these constraints? You collectivize, and I think that's what essentially SEWA does. And I really want to tie this together with the Gandhian concept of Sarvodaya, which is not just altruism but also an equal altruism. We are one. Hum SAB EK. You treat everyone as an equal while even helping them. And another thing that I wanted to talk about was Swaraj, the Gandhian concept. And this is hardly talked about when we talk about the pandemic. We talk about how people upskilled themselves, and then we tend to praise the technology. So like Zoom is praised, but not necessarily the people's resilience and the fact that people collectivized and there was will to do something. And so Swaraj was this concept that Mahatma Gandhi came up with, which was about village self-sufficiency. As India is growing, we have to explore newer economic models of self-sufficiency, and I think SEWA provides like the best example of that.
Thank you, Kartikeya. I think you've summed it up in a way that I couldn't have. We'll be outside to take questions. Yeah.
You know what? I'm sorry. I know people have questions. May I ask you to save the questions for lunchtime, because we're in a tight schedule and we have 2 very, very distinguished guests also after lunch joining us. So thank you all very much. Thank you for an extraordinary view, both into this exhibit, but also into the very powerful movement that it reflects. Thank you very much. Everyone in the audience, it's wonderful to have you here. We have lunch outside. We are on a tight schedule because we have, as I said, a number of sessions after and some very distinguished guests in addition to the ones we've heard this morning. Lunch is outside. Please ask questions and please join us back in this room at 1 o'clock. We'll have to start again at 1, and I want to make sure you all get to eat. Thank you very much.